It's a very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to Channel 2's English News Bulletin. My name is Angie Meher. I'm delighted to be in the company of my colleague Shuru Bakir. Good evening to you, Shuru.
Good evening, Angie. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start right away with the headlines. President Sisi receives phone call from his Congolese counterpart. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli participated in UN Climate Conference COP29 in Azerbaijan. Foreign Minister Abdulati says Egypt asserts its firm position on enabling the Palestinian National Authority to carry out all its duties in Gaza.
Welcome back. Now the details in full. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received a phone call from his Congolese counterpart, Felix Tshisekedi, on Tuesday. Presidential spokesperson said during their phone call, the two leaders probed means of enhancing bilateral ties in various domains with the aim of achieving interests and aspirations of the two nations. The leaders confirmed they abide by pushing forward relations in all fields, with the Congolese president appreciating Egypt's support for his country, which is positively reflected in development efforts. During the call, the two heads of state discussed peace and security in the African continent, stressing the significance of collaborating efforts to protect the continent from the repercussions being witnessed in the international arena, plus getting benefits from international platforms which suggest African visions on issues related to their direct interests.
Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli participated in the opening session of the high-level sessions of the UN Climate Conference COP29 taking place in Azerbaijan capital Baku from the 11th to the 22nd of November on behalf of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Upon his arrival, the Prime Minister was received by Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, where they welcomed Egypt's participation in this important event in which leaders and head of governments from 200 countries meet to discuss how to limit global warming and its devastating consequences. The Prime Minister will deliver Egypt's speech as part of the head State General remarks on behalf of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and will also take a part in roundtables along with the participating world leaders on different topics pertaining to climate action such as climate change, adaptation and financing.
Also on the sidelines of the UN Climate Conference COP29, the Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli participated in a roundtable entitled Energy Enhancing Climate Change Mitigation Measures. During his participation, Madbouli reviewed Egypt's efforts to accelerate the energy transformation, adding that the state has exerted the utmost efforts to provide the appropriate environment to implement the ambitious goal for renewable energy to reach 42% of energy in the energy mix by 2030. Prime Minister also noted the needs and priorities of developing countries in a bid to avoid increasing their burdens.
On the sidelines of the UN Climate Conference COP29 taking place in Azerbaijan's capital Baku, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli held a series of meetings with a number of heads of state and international institutions. The meetings focused on ways of boosting cooperation in various fields, especially climate change and green transformation. The Prime Minister also highlighted the deep, strong economic and political relations between the countries participated in the conference. And during his meeting with the UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli asserted his appreciation to the strategic partnership held with the United Arab Emirates, which serves joint interests in different fields. The Prime Minister also met with Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristina Georgieva, where he hailed the ongoing cooperation with Egypt and the IMF.
The Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli also met with Azerbaijan's President Tayyip Erdogan on the sidelines of the UN Climate Conference COP29. During the meeting, he discussed means of boosting cooperation between the two countries in the fields of energy, transportation and medical industries. He also expressed Egypt's hope to increase trade and investment exchange with Azerbaijan.
World leaders met Tuesday at the United Nations Annual Climate Conference in Baku, Azerbaijan. Addressing the event, UN General Secretary General Antonio Guterres said nations at the COP29 summit must reach a deal that does not leave poorer countries empty-handed in their fight against climate change. Guterres said a deal is a must, adding that the world witnessed the hottest day, months and year on record and a masterclass in climate destruction. United Nations Climate Conference kickstarts. Meanwhile, the top leaders of the 13 largest carbon dioxide polluting countries and not attending their nations are responsible for more than 70% of 2030's heat-trapping gases. The world's biggest polluters and strongest economic, China and United States, aren't sending their number one. First, India and Indonesia heads of state are also not in attendance, meaning the four most popular nations with more than 42% of all world's population aren't having leaders speak.
On the sidelines of the UN Climate Conference COP29, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Dr. Ahmed Al-Tayyib, stressed the importance of Arab and Islamic unity in confronting the challenges facing the nation, foremost of which is the brutal aggression on Gaza and Lebanon. This came during a meeting between the Grand Imam, the chairman of the Muslim Council of Elders, and the Iraqi President, Abdul Latif Rashid, to discuss ways to enhance bilateral ties. For his part, the Iraqi President expressed his appreciation of the leadership and people for Al-Azhar's positions on the Israeli aggression on Gaza, stressing the need for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. He also emphasized the need for Arab solidarity and unity of Islamic nations in confronting the aggression.
Egypt condemned in the strongest terms the extremist statements of Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich, calling for imposing Israeli sovereignty and settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank. The statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed that the statement of the Israeli minister represents a flagrant violation of international humanitarian and international law and all the relevant Security Council resolutions. Egypt stressed that these unreasonable and extremist statements by a member of the Israeli government clearly reflect the Israeli rejection of adopting peace option in the region. Egypt also confirmed its rejection of these statements that fuel extremes and violence, stressing on the international responsibility to protect the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, foremost of which is their rights of self-determination. Egypt also warned against this continuing escalation that aims at prolonging the conflict, inflaming it, and expanding its scope in the region.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, Badr Abdelati, stressed on Egypt's firm position on enabling the Palestinian National Authority to carry out all its duties in the Gaza Strip. This came as the Foreign Minister received the UN High Commissioner for Humanitarian Affairs, Sigrid Kaag, to follow up on ways to deal with the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Strip and implement the necessary humanitarian aid to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. Abdelati expressed Egypt's keenness to continue consulting with the UN official on implementing her mandate under UN Security Council Resolution number 2720 and the necessity of working on the immediate and sustainable implementation of humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, as well as pressuring Israel to shoulder its responsibility towards the civilians in the area.
Israeli occupation military offense in the Gaza Strip has killed at least 43,665 Palestinians and wounded 103.
United Nations on Tuesday warned that already low levels of aid trickling into Gaza had dwindled further, with the situation in the besieged north especially catastrophic. The warning from UNRWA came as Israel said it was opening an additional aid crossing into Gaza on the eve of a U.S.-imposed deadline to improve humanitarian conditions in the war-ravaged territory. 8 international aid groups said in a report that Israel has failed to meet U.S. demands that it allow greater humanitarian access to the war-ravaged Gaza Strip, where conditions are worse than at any point in the 13-month-old war. Louise Waterridge, an UNRWA emergencies officer, highlighted that aid entering the Strip is at its lowest level in months.
The Israeli occupation military bounded Beirut's southern spurs with airstrikes on Tuesday, mounting one of its heaviest daytime attacks yet on the Hezbollah-controlled area after the defense minister ruled out a ceasefire until Israeli occupation goals were met. Smoke billowed over Beirut as at least 10 blasts were heard across the city. The strikes followed an Israeli occupation forces warning identifying 12 sites in the southern suburbs and saying it would take action against them soon.
Ukraine said Tuesday that the toll from a Russian strike on the hometown of President Volodymyr Zelensky killed 4 people, a 32-year-old and her 3 children, including a newborn. The strike on Kyiv rig a day earlier ripped into the upper stories of a Soviet-era residential building in the industrial town, burying victims beneath debris. We have the details.
Ukraine said Tuesday that the toll from a Russian strike on the hometown of President Volodymyr Zelensky had killed 4 people, a 32-year-old and 3 children, including a newborn. The strike on Kyiv rig a day earlier ripped into the upper stories of a Soviet-era residential building in the industrial town, burying victims beneath dirt. Interior Minister said Tuesday morning that the rescue operations at the scene were completed and announced the death toll, adding that 14 people had been wounded in the strike. The Office of the Prosecutor General said the bodies of a 32-year-old woman, a 2-month-old boy, and children aged 2 and 10 have been retrieved from the rubble. In a separate post, they said a total of 589 children have been killed and 1,681 wounded since Russian President Vladimir Putin launched the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Ukrainian emergency services distributed images showing municipal workers in helmets carrying one of the dead in a white bag and over mounds of brick and bent metal. Separately, authorities in the southern city roll over them.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up the evening's English News Bulletin here on Channel 2. You're in the company of myself, Angie Meher, and Shurut Bakir. Thank you very much, Shurut.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you for watching.